politics expert has told LBC News Vladimir Putin will continue to destabilise order in the international system after his election win. Western politicians say the vote was neither free nor fair. Lecturer in politics and international relations at the University of Hertfordshire, Dr. Ben Nutt, says we can expect more of the same from him.
This kind of gives Putin a mandate to continue what he's been doing for the last kind of 4 years, for the next 6 years at least. It can be used to discredit opposition, it can be used to discredit any protests that come, because if there's a protest, the party line and the central line from the Kremlin will be, well, 90% of Russian people voted for me, so this is going to be the policy. The Ukraine policy will continue because that hasn't impacted on the outcome and the political mandate that's there. Putin will continue to act in the same way as what he has done, certainly since the kind of the early 2010s in the build-up to Crimea, and then since Crimea as well. We'll see Russia continue to act in the same way it has done on the international stage, through this kind of mirage of proxy conflicts, potentially meddling in certain situations, and just really trying to destabilise any form of kind of consistency that there was in the international system, rather than kind of overthrow it or revolt against it.
That's Dr. Ben Nutt from the University of Hertfordshire.
This is LBC News.
7 men have been jailed for their part in a riot outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Merseyside. Around 300 people turned up to a protest at the Suites Hotel in Knowsley in February last year. A police van was torched and several officers were hurt. LBC News North West correspondent Chris Chambers has been speaking to John Fitzgerald from Merseyside Police, who led the investigation.
There was an initial report from a juvenile female within the Kirby area regarding one of the asylum seekers. Unfortunately, there was a lot of misinformation and rumour that circulated on social media, which led to the tensions within the local community. That initial incident was investigated by the police and the CPS, and no further action was taken against that individual, but this caused animosity to stir within the community and for them to attend that location on the evening.
How dangerous is that misinformation? Obviously what we saw came about from something that could have been avoided.
Yeah, extremely dangerous. You know, people circulating information on social media cannot be regulated, and we do find that there's a lot of untruths that then whip up community tensions. People need to acknowledge what they're posting online and the truthfulness of that, and it can have serious consequences.
In terms of how it unfolded, just talk us through, sort of what happened, because it initially was meant to be peaceful, wasn't it, and then it sort of got out of hand.
Yeah, it started off peacefully, but unfortunately a minority of the protesters attending on the night then began to damage police vehicles, throw objects at the police officers who were in attendance, including bricks, bottles and paving slabs, and some of the defendants were even firing fireworks at the officers.
As a police officer, that's a difficult situation to deal with, isn't it, and not something any police officer should have to deal with.
They were just going about the duty on the night, and unfortunately they come under attack from a minority. We did have a few officers who were assaulted and injured. One officer went to hospital from concussion, but fortunately they weren't more seriously injured.
Just a word on those who have been convicted, their behaviour, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the violence seen on that night was completely unacceptable. They will now have to face the consequence of their actions. You know, this behaviour will not be tolerated.
People will continue to protest in the future. We know there's lots going on politically and internationally as well, which might result in protests in this area. What are your words to people who maybe think their conduct going forward?
Yeah, we absolutely respect the right to protest as Merseyside Police. We facilitate numerous peaceful protests regularly across Merseyside, but when it turns to violence, criminality and disorder, that will not be tolerated, and we will act robustly to stop that happening.
An 8th man's been handed a suspended jail term and 1 man's failed to turn up to court. The North East Trailblazer devolution deal has been signed in Durham. The agreement between the government and 7 councils will see an investment fund of £1.4 billion for the region. LBC News reporter Emma Craigie has more.
I've been at St Chad's College, a beautiful part of Durham University, for the signing of the historic North East Trailblazer devolution deal. Now, we've seen these agreements in the West Midlands and Greater Manchester, but this one has been a long time coming, with plenty of internal politics causing delays over the years. But today is the day it's finally being signed between the government and the 7 councils. Here's Levelling Up Minister Jacob Young on what it means for the region.
Well, it absolutely is a historic day for the region. You know, signed this devolution deal today, which means £1.4 billion of investment coming into the North East over the next 30 years, and the opportunity for the whole of the North East to elect a new mayor who's going to be their champion.
And while speaking to the media, Mr Young also answered questions on the Public Accounts Committee report last week that stated the government is unable to provide any compelling examples of what levelling up cash has delivered so far. Here's what he had to say.
Obviously, when it comes to funding for regenerating high streets, etc., buildings don't just pop up overnight and they take time to build, but we're seeing delivery on the ground today in terms of that. But more broadly, levelling up is about spreading that opportunity across the country. We're here today signing a £1.4 billion devolution deal for the North East. That sounds like levelling up to me.
Now, there's certainly a sense of cautious optimism that putting more decisions into the hands of politicians in this region is a good thing. But with many failed promises around North East regeneration before, people here will be keeping a close eye with a good pinch of scepticism about what difference this new deal will actually make.
Emma Craigie, this is LBC News with all the sports news for you next. You'll hear from Olympic cyclist Laura Kenny, who's announced her retirement from the sport.
It's a sacrifice too far now, and you've got to make sure that the sacrifices are worth it. And for me now, it's too much. Like, I don't want to leave the little boys anymore.
That's on the way.
LBC News.
If you've been injured in an accident at work, you could be entitled to thousands of pounds in compensation. Talk to Harris Fowler today. For over 25 years, we've helped people who've been injured at work, in a warehouse, a factory, on site, or anywhere. With a 94% success rate, call the award-winning Harris Fowler now. 0800 213 214. It's no win, no fee, no risk. Harris Fowler, the personal injury solicitor.
Cabin crew, Evelyn. Wow, that was a quick flight. Never mind. Bondi Beach, Barrier Reef, here we come. Holiday of a lifetime. Cannot wait.
Me neither. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll shortly be landing in Austria. Austria? We're supposed to be going to Australia. What have you done?
Should have gone to Specsavers. What can I test online? Has anyone got any long trousers I could borrow?
I've only got a bikini, Andy.
LBC News. Weather.
It will be a cloudy start to Tuesday morning with a little light rain. Clouds will gradually break through to allow bright spells of isolated showers to develop during the afternoon. It will feel warm areas of sunshine, highs of 16 degrees. Further rain is possible on Tuesday night, and it will be cloudy on Wednesday and Thursday, largely dry with more mild temperatures. Rain on Friday morning will clear to sunshine and then some isolated showers. Temperatures will be above average, but feeling cooler in strong winds.
I'm Martin Williams, and this is LBC News. And let me bring you some sport now. I will come on to the controversy around Nottingham Forest in a few moments. But first, today Laura Kenny, who says her ability to maintain Olympic success for so long is the thing she's most proud of. The 31-year-old's announced her retirement from cycling with 5 Olympic gold medals under her belt. She's told Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC it came down to a choice between cycling and parenthood.
With Albie, I was so focused on trying to prove that you could do both and you could juggle both. And yes, sacrifices would have to be made, but in the end, they would be worth it. Whereas for me right now, I just feel like it's a sacrifice too far now. And as much as I would like to say, you sat here saying, yeah, you can have everything. You've got to make sure that the sacrifices are worth it. And for me now, it's too much. Like, I don't want to leave the little boys anymore.
And when you have
and the fact that I could maintain it, maintain Olympic success for so long is what I'm most proud of.
So looking forward, I see all the headlines about Laura Kenny retiring. You're 31 or something. I'm 65. I'm the age at which people retire, not you. So I just Of course you're gonna devote yourself to the kids and you're going to enjoy that a lot, but there's going to be more in your life than that, is there not, going forward?
Oh, I mean, I hope so. I know. I mean, earlier every time everyone said happy retirement, I'm like, I'm not dad, I'm not 60. But I mean, I've got so many interests that I just haven't had the time to kind of get my teeth stuck into, you know. And as an athlete, you have maternity leave when you're pregnant, not when they're here, and it's a really funny kind of concept that we go for. But I got to experience lots of different things working with the media, and I really enjoy that, and it's something that I'd like to do more of if I can.
There you go, coming to a sporting screen near you, Dame Laura Kenny, who's announced her retirement at the age of 31.
Where the news never stops. LBC News.
Let me bring you some other sporting stories now. Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag hopes their dramatic 4-3 victory over Liverpool in the FA Cup can be a turning point in their season. His side turned the tie around in extra time to set up a semi-final with Championship team Coventry. Former United goalkeeper Mark Bosnich tells Sky Sports News they must build on the performance at Old Trafford.
I can't underline how important that was, especially being at home as well, and especially against their fiercest rivals in Liverpool. It's a type of season-defining win that if you do happen to go on and really achieve something like to lift the FA Cup would be a great achievement, especially some of the places that have been this season.
Eric Cantona has hinted he'd be interested in a role at Manchester United under new part owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He won 4 Premier League titles and 2 FA Cups with the club before retiring in 1997, but says United remains full in his heart. The Frenchman told The Big Issue he'd really love to be a manager, but doesn't have enough time and would consider something else. Carlos Alcaraz has retained the Indian Wells tennis title, claiming his first trophy since winning Wimbledon last summer. World number 2 beat Daniel Medvedev in straight sets. Iga Swiatek eased past Maria Sakkari by the same margin in the women's final. Now, Nottingham Forest have been deducted 4 Premier League points for breaking profit and sustainability rules. The penalty takes them into the relegation zone, with Luton moving out of the bottom 3 by 1 point. Andy Cadell is the chair of the Nottingham Forest Supporters Trust. He's been speaking to Sky Sports News.
The speculation was somewhere between 3 and 6 months. Everyone knew we were going to get a sporting sanction, there was going to be money. So I suppose 4 points is towards the lower end of what people were expecting, but can't say I'm happy with it. For me, the context is that we were overspent for 2 months, but in that period, we played 3 games in the Premier League, just 3 games, and we lost 2 of them. We beat Sheffield United, so a 4-point deduction for gaining 3 points, you could say. Let's say that our overspend meant that we beat Sheffield United. I sort of get it, but it feels a bit tough.
Andy Cadell, the chair of the Nottingham Forest Supporters Trust.
LBC News. The latest news headlines next.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of our EDF customer service agents busy listening and supporting our customers. We're proud that over the last 5 years, Citizens Advice ranked us #1 for customer service more often than any other energy company in Britain. For verification and to find out more, visit edfenergy.com/helpingbritain.
Podpoint was founded in 2009, and they've worked with Barclays at every stage of their journey. With our business funding support, they've gone from startup to operating one of the largest networks of electric vehicle charging points in the UK. We even helped coordinate and sponsor their IPO. You have arrived at the London Stock Exchange. Grow your business. Bank on Barclays. Search Barclays Business Banking.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC News.
where the news never stops. This is LBC News.
From Global's newsroom, I'm Josh Bancroft. The government have overturned 10 amendments to the Rwanda bill that were made by the House of Lords, which will now consider the legislation again. A number of the amendments were focused on the safety of Rwanda and putting safeguards in place. And the government's saying the bill, as it is the right one. Sadiq Awala is from the think tank British Future. He's told us the changes he has suggested are quite popular with the public.
Yes, liquidated polling and actually crossed the divide on politics. A large majority of the public, including Conservatives, think the amendments are reasonable because they say if you're going to make it safe, make sure it is safe, and that's a slightly different question from the principle of the policy, is it right or wrong?
Conservative MPs are being told installing a new Prime Minister into Number 10 is not feasible before the election. There have been widespread reports that backbenchers are considering putting forward Commons leader Penny Mordaunt. A new report has found nearly £60 million will need to be invested in the electricity grid in the first half of the next decade to support homes and businesses. The electricity system operator has suggested 20,000 jobs could be created, with 9 in 10 being outside London. Legislation to establish English football's independent regulator will be introduced to Parliament on Tuesday. Its key responsibilities will include ensuring clubs are financially sustainable and safeguarding heritage. And the Princess of Wales has been seen visiting a farm shop near Windsor. She's been largely out of the public eye since having abdominal surgery. From Global's newsroom, you're up to date.
LBC News weather.
It will be a cloudy start to Tuesday with a little light rain, bright spells later, highs of 16 degrees. I'm Tim Hoffman. I'll have a full forecast in the next 15 minutes.
LBC News travel.
Well, the travelling in the capital this morning in Forest Gate, Romford Road is closed between Radcliffe Road and Green Street after an building fire. Now in Wales, the M4 has been closed completely between junctions 48 and Hendy to 47 in the Swansea West services, all because of an accident late last night. And in Grantham, Lincolnshire, the A1 closed southbound from Belton Road turn-off to Stamford for emergency road surface repairs. Your next update in 20 minutes on LBC News.
This is LBC News.
And I'm Martin Williams. Tory MPs say they're lucky to have Rishi Sunak as their leader. There have been rumours that some have been plotting to oust him, saying they'd do better at the general election under Penny Mordaunt. LBC News political editor Natasha Clark's got the latest from Westminster.
Government sources are noting that Penny Mordaunt could lose her seat at the next election, saying we couldn't have someone who's a Prime Minister who is about to lose their seat, potentially. A lot of other people say the Penny plot is complete nonsense. Some say this is just a stalking horse for the right of the party to slam her before they get up their own candidate. And those close to Penny Mordaunt are also dismissing this plan. Obviously, she's not come out herself to say that those plots aren't happening, but she has been briefing people close to her. They think it's just being stirred up by people who are working to bring down the Prime Minister and really is probably not about to happen. But I think it's fair to say there is some chatter in Westminster and the mood is very febrile and it is turning more and more against the Prime Minister, especially as those polls continue to be so dire. And we do count down to the May election, which, as all polls are saying, is going to be a real drubbing for the Conservatives.
Well, Rishi Sunak says he's not interested in Westminster politics, saying he's focused on delivering for the people of Britain. The UN-backed Global Hunger Monitor says extreme food shortages in parts of the Gaza Strip have already exceeded famine levels. As the conflict there continues, Israel insists it's been letting aid in, but that Hamas is using violence to take it. Yusuf Hamash from the Norwegian Council of Refugees is in Rafah. He's told LBC News agencies are struggling to help.
In Gaza, we have different situations in the north. It's a bit different than the situation in the middle area, and it's a bit different than the situation in Rafah.
Situation on the island. We urge the Cuban government to refrain from violence and unjust detentions and are calling on the authorities to respect the Cuban citizens' right to peaceful assembly.
The United Nations Secretary General has expressed concern over deteriorating security in Myanmar and repeated his calls for an end to hostilities and improved humanitarian access. A spokesman for Antonio Guterres said he was particularly alarmed by reports that military airstrikes on a village in Rakhine State on Monday had killed and injured many civilians. The US software giant NVIDIA has unveiled its latest artificial intelligence chip, which it claims is a huge leap forward from its existing market leader. The company's chief executive said the new chip has 208 billion transistors, making it more than twice as powerful at training AI models as the company's previous chip. An original pair of ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz are to go on a world tour before being sold at auction in December. The owner of the shoes put them up for sale with an estimated value of around $3.5 million. The slippers, described by the auctioneers as the most important prop in Hollywood history, are on display in cities including New York, London and Tokyo. BBC News. You're listening to the BBC World Service, and this is Business Matters with me, Sam Fennick, for the next hour. Coming up on the programme today, could the Bank of Japan end its policy towards negative interest rates? We'll preview the decision, which is due at around 3 a.m. GMT. A trade war is brewing between Brazil and China. Brazil's launched an investigation into alleged dumping of industrial products by China. China's exports grew by more than 7% in January and February as it looks to boost its struggling economy. So we'll talk about how a country like Brazil takes on the world's second largest economy. And be careful of your timepiece. Luxury watches are being stolen.
We locate about 4 stolen watches every day, and of the ones that we find, about 1 in every 7 watches has turned up in a different country to the one in which it was stolen.
As ever on Business Matters, we're joined throughout the programme by 2 guests on opposite sides of the world. It's a very good evening to Oliver Stunkel, an Associate Professor of International Relations at the Vargas Foundation in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Very good evening to you, Oliver. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Sam. It's a pleasure to be part of the discussion.
I believe there's a very warm weather in your part of Brazil at the moment.
Absolutely. Actually, I would say a bit too warm. So everyone's hoping for the temperatures to go down so we can actually go outside again.
Oh wow, you all stuck inside by your air conditioning
Exactly.
units.
Plus, we had a 10-hour-long blackout, so it was even quite hot inside, but it was still better than being outside. So, of course, because of the extremely high temperatures, everybody's having their air cons to the maximum. So that has led to a breakdown in parts of Sao Paulo today.
Well, I hope you're buying your aircon at the moment or for the next hour or so, because things get very heated here on Business Matters. We've got with us a very good morning to Rebecca Chong-Wilkins, Senior Asia Correspondent for Bloomberg. She joins us this morning from Hong Kong. Hello, Rebecca. How is the weather with you? Are you as warm as Oliver there is in Brazil?
Good morning. I'm afraid not. It's actually a rather miserable start to the day here. It's quite misty. In fact, this whole year has been so far. We're still waiting for spring to arrive.
Well, we have daffodils coming up here in the north of England, which we're enjoying seeing, and blossom is starting to appear on the trees. So we're all feeling a little bit more optimistic. We'll move on and talk about our top story, because within the next hour or so we're going to find out what the Bank of Japan will do with interest rates. Now, it is expected that it will end its negative rate policy, and this could be a significant move as it's maintained ultra-loose monetary policy with interest rates at 0.1% since 2016. The recent strong wage growth in Japan has prompted policymakers to consider this change. If the BOJ indeed decides to end negative rates, it will be the world's last central bank to do so. Well, earlier I spoke to Sayuri Shiori, and she is a professor at the Keio University, and she's also a former Bank of Japan board member. I asked her whether she expected Japan to end its negative interest rate.
Yes, I expect the Bank of Japan will take a major policy change, and actually they are sending a lot of signal to the market.
What sort of signals have they been sending?
For example, they are saying, the wages are, getting stronger as a result of this spring negotiation. The governor used to pay a lot of attention to this wage negotiation, and the board member also say there are positive, economic condition, the wage price virtuous cycle. So they are already sending this kind of signal. So I think they are going to do some changes today.
And what will it mean for the policy to change so dramatically?
Okay, let me say, so they probably will get rid of YCC, yield curve control. So on a very short-term interest rate, so it's a negative interest rate, minus 0.1%, probably they will get rid of it, and then probably they are going to introduce sort of a policy target range between 0 and 0.1%. That is a policy they used to do before previous governor came in 2013. Okay, on the long-term and 10-year interest rate, they keep target at 0%. So together with this short-term and long-term interest rate, they call it yield curve control. I think they are going to get rid of it this time. Now, the most important thing is we should pay attention to what Bank of Japan is going to do about upper limit of 10-year yield. So target is 0%, but they allow some flexibility. So upper limit is set at 1%. That is more important. If the Bank of Japan completely get rid of that, this will be a major change. But if the Bank of Japan will still maintain this upper limit, it means they don't want to, have a lot of flexibility on the long-term interest rate. So in that sense, they are not going to have very, very big changes. Okay?
And is this something that professors and economists like yourself are welcoming and have been pushing?
Okay, here there are two views. So a lot of market participants want to have some flexibility. So we are doing this low interest rate for such a long time, and people get tired of it. So market really want more flexibility, and maybe they can make more money and so on. Now, for other scholars, if you look at the capacity for BOJ to achieve 2% in stable manner, price stability target, that is I think questionable. Our economy is so weak. Also, large company successfully negotiated with a higher wage increase, 5.3%. But once you include small medium enterprises, there's a lot of uncertainty. So, and also, at this moment, nominal wages are growing just 1.3%. The real wages are dropping because of high inflation. The real consumption is dropping. It's very difficult to say our economy is so strong. So in terms of, 2% in the fundamental side, probably some academics may question about why BOJ is doing this. Also, BOJ is going to take action just by looking at these large companies, labor unions negotiation, right? Why don't they wait until June? Because June, the actual wages, including small, medium enterprises, the data will come up. So why don't they wait until July meeting, right? So they are rushing. They are really sending signal that they don't want to wait, and they want to rush, and they want to make action today. Really want to get rid of this negative interest rate. A lot of side effects.
Now you've been a board member at the Bank of Japan. Just explain to us briefly, if you can, what the atmosphere will be like in that meeting. How will people be feeling in this kind of, as you've explained, quite a monumental day?
So, within the board members, they are changing the communication, approaches. So when the new governor came in April last year, they emphasized achieving 2% price stability is the most important because the Bank of Japan has never achieved the price stability. So, from that perspective, I thought that they're going to maintain the current policy. But gradually, they started to increase flexibility. And then over these 2-3 years, suddenly they changed communication tones. And it's become more, show more confidence about the economic condition. And they started to say negative interest rate removal where possible, and so on. So I think over these 2-3 months, they changed their communication style and tones. So probably, I think maybe they thought, still inflation above 2%. It's a cost push, so commodity prevails, so eventually inflation will start to come down. So maybe it's a good opportunity for them to get rid of negative interest rate because the Bank of Japan is aware of the side effect for many years.
So that result there expected around 3 a.m. GMT, so in a couple of hours. Now it is a big week for central banks. The Bank of Japan is first to set rates today.
Tuesday, be closely followed by the US Fed, and then the Bank of England's interest rate decision is also coming later this week. Rebecca, a significant week, or just a significant week for people in those particular countries?
No, I think this is going to be a significant week and a jam-packed week for traders in particular who definitely think about these things in sort of the global context. I just add we have the Japan decision coming in soon, but we also have Australia's central bank announcing its rates policy today. That's widely expected to hold at about the 12-year high. And then later this week we're going to hear from Powell at the Fed. Not expecting any massive changes there. The sort of more significant meeting is probably going to be in June, but it is closely watched. There has been some frustration about sort of Powell's lack of more definitive language from corners of the market. And then in the UK, as you say as well, we're going to hear about the latest inflation rate. That's going to partly affect the Bank of England decision on its rate the next day. So yeah, it's an incredibly busy week. So far, markets have been actually quite stable, but I think we are expecting a bit more volatility as soon as really that decision from the BOJ comes in. We've seen so far people sort of holding back a little bit, awaiting for a definitive trigger. But I think we can expect, if you look at, for example, US dollar, yen trade, we might see sort of a knee-jerk sell-off when the first headline on that drops, if indeed they do decide to end that yield curve control. So yes, certainly a big week and a big week of trading, market trading.
Well, let's now talk about trading, but trading between two nations, between Brazil and China. We've got two very well-placed guests today to talk about that. Olivia is in Brazil, and Rebecca, as we said, is in Hong Kong. Now, there is a bit of a war brewing between the two nations because Brazil has initiated anti-dumping investigations after China dumped a significant increase in imports. Now, these investigations reflect concern about an influx of cheap Chinese products like sheet metal, pre-painted metal sheets, chemicals and tyres. Oliver, we're talking about at least half a dozen investigations into these products coming in from China. What's prompted the investigation? Is it something that industry has put pressure on the government to look into?
Absolutely, Sam. This is a big dilemma for the Brazilian government because it really wants to bet on industrial policy, wants to wean Brazil off its dependency of the exports of commodities. So this really comes precisely at the wrong time because these domestic industries are really feeling the pain because of sudden increases in the imports of the products that they also produce coming from China. And this is a dilemma for Lula because one of the key things on the foreign policy front he promised when he got elected is to repair ties to China. He's been very, very careful not to criticize the Chinese, who are the major buyers of Brazilian commodities. So right now we basically have the president between two hugely influential groups within Brazil, which is the industry, which says we need better protection against these products from China, and the commodity exporters, which say let's not mess with China because we really need them to continue to buy our commodities and agricultural products. And that's really the area that has boosted Brazil's growth over the past year.
I was looking at a graph, in fact I've got a graph in front of me of imports into Brazil of steel and iron from China. And the value has gone from 1.6 billion in 2014 to 2.7 billion last year. But in the last 2 years, the graph is virtually vertical. It's suddenly shot up within the last 2 years, really significantly. What's happened in those last couple of years since about 2020?
Well, I mean, the Brazilian industry say that this is basically sort of excess production that China wants to get rid of, and it's really hurting Brazilian industries. And I think there's some evidence that that may in fact be happening because what the Brazilian industry saying that this is something that's happening elsewhere as well. This is not a Brazil problem. This is part of a broader Chinese strategy. But in an ideal world, I think the Brazilian government would have kept it under wraps because, as I said, this is a very uncomfortable situation. The first big trip that Lula undertook when he became president and took lots of businessmen and women along with him was to China. And, you know, we've had a fairly aggressive response in the Chinese newspaper Global Times today, basically saying that this is the West's fault and they're trying to, you know, divide Brazil and China. So that's going to be a tricky issue for the president to sort of find a compromise between those two groups.
Well, Rebecca, how might this, do you think, sitting on the other side of the world, affect those relationships between China and the rest of the world? I mean, exports to Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia have all risen sharply in recent months.
Well, I think Oliver's entirely right, and that in some ways this is going to be a very delicate balance for President Xi Jinping to strike too. Really, this is an interesting story because it shows so clearly that push and pull when it comes to trade. China, on the one hand, wanting to strengthen its relationship with Latin America, the so-called Global South, developing nations, i.e. all of those countries outside of the US and its allies that help sort of counter the strained ties, strained trade that China is experiencing with the US, with Europe and so on. But at the same time, of course, not wanting to, I suppose, sort of rub those countries up the wrong way by flooding the market with exports. But China has its own issue here, its own domestic challenge, which is that it's trying to transform its economic model. And as a result of that, as a result of cracking down on the property sector, it needs to find these new drivers of growth. And that is partly what's behind the stress of this.